Hello, welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about motion studies, which are really the idea of creating animations in SolidWorks. And to really understand this tutorial, I encourage you to learn a little bit about animation in general. I have a slideshow on animations. I encourage you to, you know, look at this to get an idea of how an animation is made, why it's so powerful, and why we want to learn this. Okay, so really the idea is to create a way to show how your machine is designed. For example, this is kind of hard to communicate in a meeting because not everyone is familiar with schematics, section views, and orthographic projections and things like that. It could be kind of confusing. So let's say you're doing a tech review and you want to get some feedback on your machine. It's a good idea to use an animation to do that, so everyone's kind of on the same page. Or maybe you're trying to create some kind of product for a catalog and you want to sell this to customers. Having an animation is just a really good skill set to have. You will be much more effective by understanding how to do that. So I'm not going to go over this whole slide deck. This is just talking about the background of animation, how to create one professionally. You can read these on your own if you like, but I encourage you to just understand the basics so that some of the tools that we will learn in SolidWorks is going to make a little bit more sense. When you understand animation, pretty much the sky is the limit. I mean, anything you can imagine, you can create. Any dynamic simulation, any fluid simulation, any rendering that you want, any caustic rendering or anything like that. Anything you want to imagine, you can do it. So there are steps to this process. It's a lot of work. There's compositing, editing, texturing, rigging, and things like that. But once you understand how to do it, the sky's the limit, like I said. And I actually used to do animation for 3 years. I used to do CGI for TV, for corporations, training videos, entertainment, media, advertising, and things like that. So I really enjoyed this period in my career, and this is why this is actually one of my favorite lectures in the class. Just because, really the sky is the limit in this industry. On my website, I used three commonly used techniques in 2D animation that I wanted to share. The first one is frame by frame animation. Okay, that's kind of how the old Disney movies were made, and that's what I used for this chain. Another technique I used is motion tween, which is pretty much setting a keyframe at one location, setting a keyframe at another location, and letting the computer calculate the frames in between. So that saves you a little bit of time because you don't have to draw every frame one at a time. And then the third technique I use is called a shape tween, which is kind of like a motion tween, but it's on vertices. And I used it on this spring, especially on these hooks. I set a keyframe on a certain vertice in one location on the time slider, and I set it at another location, and then the animation happens. So what we're going to animate today is what you see here. This is a tricone drill used for drilling gas and oil from the ground. And let's take a look at what we got going on. First of all, you have some checkered background just to get a point of reference, because the camera is moving. So it's just to tell you that, we're moving in space. So we have an animation on the camera. We also have some explosion collapse animation. These are slowly rotating and they're changing colors. And then this whole thing's rotating and it's translating. And every time you see this thing move, it's always starting from slow and gradually speeding up. It's not going 0 to 60 instantly. It's slowly and gradually speeding up. So we're going to talk about some of those little details. So what I'm going to do now is just kind of take this tutorial one step at a time and complete our animation. So what you want to do is open up the start file and you'll get something like this. And what you got to do first is understand that it's gotta be free. Like, if I can't move it in the model tab, I'm not going to be able to move it in the animation tab or the motion study tab. This is where the animation is going to happen. If I can't move it here, I cannot animate it here. So you have to be able to move it. So to do that, I created a configuration to set it as a free-for-all. And now as you can see, I can move it. So that's the first thing you got to understand. So the next step is going to be to create an explosion view. So if you remember, we've already talked about that during the assembly drawing exercise, where to create an assembly drawing or a bomb, you have to first create an explosion view on the assembly file and then import that onto the drawing. So we have to recreate one of these to build our animation. And you have a chart here. It shows you how far each part has to go and how much it has to rotate. And we're going to use that on the motion study. So I'm not going to go over how to create an assembly explosion view again, but if you remember, it's all over here. And I'll just do one of the pieces. Okay, I'll do one of the pieces, which is to move this piece. Okay, so there's this step. I'm going to double click it, and I'm going to pick 2 inches and 720, apply, done. Okay, so let's say I just had one step like this. And just to show you what that looks like, let me do animate explode. You see what's going on? See how it's rotating? Now this is just a separate animation. When we actually do the motion study, we will be able to animate that in more detail. This is just a preview in a way. So when we're done, we get all these steps, all right? We follow the tutorial, we follow the translation numbers and the rotation numbers, and this is what we get. So let's see what we got now. I'm gonna right click and animate, and here's what we get, okay? So now that we have our explosion view in good hands, we're going to animate this. So once you're done with everything, okay, in the model mode, I encourage you to right click and say create new motion study. Because if you use an existing one, sometimes it doesn't update with the changes you made on the model, and you're gonna get some issues. So this is why I encourage you to right click create new motion study so that it's clean. It's a clean start from any issue, any change that you made on the model. Okay, it's just me speaking from experience. Okay, so that if you don't come across that issue, great. But over the years, I've noticed that it's best to start from scratch like that. Okay, so moving on the tutorial, one of the very first things I encourage you to do is to disable playback of view keys, just because sometimes it doesn't reset properly. Okay, every time you make a change. So this is on over here. Disable playback of view keys. Trust me, you're going to be thankful for doing this as we progress. The next thing we're going to learn is the properties. So again, this tutorial is really mainly talking about these tools here. If you notice, every tutorial in mce181 is talking about 12 specialty tools. In this tutorial, it's going to be talking about these. So this is just talking about the frame rate. Let's just change it to 12 just to change it. Okay, so these are just the properties of our animation. And then there's other things you can do like spring, contact, and gravity, dynamic features. We're not going to go into that level of detail. Most of the animations we're going to do is going to be hard-coded through keyframes. And this is what keyframes are. Okay, if you look at this example, these are keyframes. This is the time slider. So this is the fourth dimension. You have the first, second, and third dimension, which is what you see here. This is the fourth dimension, which is an iteration of every third dimension. That's kind of what it is. It's an iteration. So the third dimension can be different at this time. It can be different at that time. And this is what we have control over through the keyframe. So what I'm saying is, in this tutorial, we're going to work mainly with keyframe animation, not so much on these dynamic functions. So having said that, the first thing we're going to do is to adjust the master keyframe. You see this black keyframe? The other ones are blue, but the black one tells you the master length of the animation. So this tells you that this is going to be a 12-second animation. and we're going to turn on auto key, which is this thing. Means anytime I make a change, all right, let's say I move this. Do you see how this keyframe inserted itself automatically? It's because I have the auto key on. Meaning anytime you make a change, it's going to insert a key. You can turn that off and just manually insert a key anytime you want. I mean, I've used many different programs like Maya, 3D Max, Flash. They all had their own key setting method. And this, sometimes I prefer that, sometimes I prefer that. But in this interface, in the SolidWorks animation set, I've noticed that the auto key is a little bit more reliable. So what we got to do now is add a camera. Because right now when I'm recording, I'm really just recording from the viewport. And that's kind of inconsistent. Because I could be recording from here once, then I could be recording from there. It's just hard to keep track of that. It's really inconsistent. What I want is to be able to select a camera from here and have a really consistent view of what I got. So I could have added this since the beginning, but the way to add a camera, you gotta go to View, Lights, Cameras, and Add Camera. You can also add a light. Okay, so a light will really get you exactly what you want. So as you can see here, I'm positioning this camera, and I want to change the focal length a little bit. See what we get. Kind of move the focus towards the camera. It gets a little challenging, but you can position it here or you can position it here, so that might be a little easier to use both, just like this. Let's increase this to something a little bigger, and there we have it. So now I can select it from the drop down. See, camera showed up, and there it is. And I can even animate it. If I go all the way to the end, and if I move the camera, so here's my camera, right? I can move it, see? Like, yeah, like that, and click OK. You see how it's moving? So in a more advanced animation program, you can even bind it to a path and get it to move on the path, so you can really get some good motion out of it. For instance, in this scene, I connected a camera to a path because, as you can see, there's a lot of speed going on. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's really a lot easier to achieve that with a path. So what I'm going to do now is use the animation wizard to animate the collapse. So this is going to be a collapse. This will only show up if you have an explosion view. And we're just going to do 0 to 3 seconds. So look how cool that is. It generated all these keyframes to perform our collapse. So if I scroll this, you see how every piece is coming together. Now obviously there's going to be a little bit of cleaning up to do. First of all, these frames, they need to be reversed. It's a bit of a glitch. Whenever you have rotation and you do a collapse, it doesn't... well, first of all, when you do the rotation, it doesn't calculate the angles. It just puts a keyframe at every frame for the incremental rotation, which is, I don't know, it's not really my favorite thing, but you can still move these around if you want. You can move these and make this one go a little slower, make this one go a little faster. So it starts fast and then it slowly closes its rotation. And you can move these anywhere you want. If you want to move these towards the beginning, you can do that. If you want to change the sequence of this, you can do that any way you want. You want to make this slower, you can do that. But one thing to remember is anytime you change something, hit this button, hit the recalculate, because otherwise it's going to give you all kinds of problems. Recalculate kind of resets everything that you did. So let's see. Let's see. So this is alright. This is good. Maybe I'm going to resequence this a bit so that it's a little bit better. And also, I may want to add some interpolation. You see how it's just kind of like moving from 0 to 60 in 0 seconds? To improve that, you can add interpolation. See, right now it's linear. You might want to change that to ease in, ease out, so it's a lot smoother. And again, I do talk about that on the side presentation. I talk a lot about how interpolation can be really modified. I mean, in SolidWorks, you just get this, you know, drop down, but in a professional animation program, you can control each node in incredible control and incredible precision. So But regardless, it's important that you include that to improve the quality of your animation. The next thing you might want to do is to drag these keyframes to the front. For some reason, it couldn't isolate those sessions together, and so it connected them. And what you see now is those tricones are now moving in sequence. See those purple tricones? Now they're moving in sequence. Okay, so spend some time to sequence this and make it look alright. The next tool we're going to learn about is the motor tool, and we're going to use it to not only rotate but also translate. But you can do that with keyframes. This is just another way of doing that. Like, for example, if I were to look at this cube, alright, I'm moving my time slider to somewhere here, and I'm going to rotate it. And look, a keyframe is added. And I'm even going to translate. I'm going to move it somewhere else. You see? And now let's see what happened. We recalculate. See, it animated the translation and the rotation. Okay, it's that simple. You can do it this way. Or you can do it with a motor tool, which I'm going to show you right now. For your final project, if you remember, you got to create an animation. I don't care which tool you use. Just animate it so that I can see how your product is used. But you can use the motor tool. You can just move this around and add keyframes, alright? You can do this any way you want. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the tutorial is actually use this cube to communicate the motor tool, the color tool, and the motor translate tool, okay? Because it's a little bit of a more simple example, and I think it'll be easier for you to understand these concepts so that you can mix and match this to the more complicated tricone tutorial sheet. So let me show you an easy motor function. So the motor tool is right here. And we're going to pick rotation. And we're going to pick this to rotate. And we'll do 100 RPM. Let's click OK. And as you can see, our motor was added. Now let's see what happens when we hit play. See, it's continuously rotating, which is really good. I mean, think of it. Think if you have like some kind of engine that you want to show continuously rotating. You don't want to sit there and rotate by hand. That would be kind of difficult. So with a motor, it's consistent, it's continuous. So I encourage you to use this tool for something that has continuous rotation like that. And let's say you wanted to go from 0 to 100 RPM. Well, guess what? You gotta go here, edit feature, change this number. Let's say to 200 RPM. And then you go back to the beginning, hit properties, edit feature, and then hit 0. So because we have auto key on, it's gonna go from 0 to 200. And you can even add an ease in, ease out interpolation. So let's see if we recalculate. See how it's going faster and faster? Let's play this. See? Slowly and faster speeding up. Okay? Let's add another motor, but this one's going to be a linear motor. We're going to pick the same thing, and it's going to go 10 inches per second. So let's see what that gives us. Again, here's the linear motor, and it's going 10 seconds. Okay, I got to recalculate. But again, because it's linear, it's just starting to 10. Alright, let's make this 20. And then let's go back here and let's change this to 0. This way it gradually increases. And I'm going to put an ease in, ease out. Alright, let's recalculate. See, it's slowly increasing. Let's play that again. Slowly moving. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how to change a color by modifying the appearance button. So to do that, see this appearance property? You gotta hit appearance, okay? And you can change this to another color if you like. And you see how you get this purple bar? That means it's changing colors. See if I hit play? See, it's changing colors. And you can even interpolate that. You see? And recalculate. So that's how you change the color. The last two steps are to save the animation and to compress it. So to do that, you gotta click this button here, Save Animation, and we're gonna call it Video. You can change the resolution, you can change the frame rate. If the file size is too large, try to reduce the frame rate. Again, this doesn't have to be very fancy. Make sure you do compress it, otherwise you'll get a big problem. Let's see. Yes, do recalculate before you save, otherwise you'll get a glitched out video. Make sure that you're on the camera one that you created before you hit save, otherwise it's just going to save your viewport. And then you can go into the folder. Okay, and then there's, we call it video. So there it is. And then you double click the video and there you have it. But if your file size is too large for whichever reason and you need to reduce it, I highly encourage you to compress it using Movie Maker. All you gotta do is import the file in the Movie Maker and export it. This should be a free program. If you use the Windows operating system, this should come with it. Otherwise, you can download it online and it's free. So from here, you can save this movie with the recommended for this project, and it's going to optimize the size. So now I'm going to save the location. I'm going to save this video that's compressed. I'll call it optimized. All right, and then it's saving it, and it's like 10% the size of the original. Okay, so if I hit close, let's take a look at what we got. I called it optimized. So there's optimized. Let's see how big it is. See, 382 kilobytes. The original was 1.12 megabytes. And look at the quality. You can't even tell the difference. So I highly encourage you to compress your final video with Windows Movie Maker before you submit on Oswald. Because if the file is too large, Oswald will not let you submit. And then that's gonna give all kinds of problems. So that's animations for you. Okay, you can now use this and mix and match what you learned to create any kind of animation that you want, really. Again, I really just went over the basics of animations. SolidWorks has more advanced kinematic solvers for like friction and gravity and things like that. And again, SolidWorks is really just a toned down animation program. If you go into something more serious like Maya or 3D Max or Combustion and all these other compositing programs and things like that, you know, the sky's the limit. But what I'm trying to show you is how to use the SolidWorks motion studies to create very basic animations so that you at least can communicate your designs in a meeting for tech reviews, just on how to use your product, how it's put together. Trust me, that's going to make your presentation so much easier to understand. I think a lot of people will be on the same page when you show your animations, and it's just a very, very powerful communication tool.